Good morning, and welcome to this morning's webinar. We'll be doing this webinar audio only. The video is not working today. We're having some trouble with some storms out here with some of the internet connection, but we will be doing audio. My name is Daryl Moon. I'll be your host today. This is the 9th webinar in our series of short 30-minute webinars on the best practices of managing population mental health, brought to you by Going on Offense and sponsored by Resilience Pro. Recordings of each of our previous webinars are available on goingonoffense.com. As we know, the pandemic has heightened the need to address mental health. The uncertainty that we all face is having devastating effects on emotional well-being throughout the country. We've been managing population mental health for over 20 years through a very different model where we've taken the financial risk, and instead of making more money by increasing rates, our profits have come through keeping people healthy and through early intervention. So we've used an abundance strategy by getting people in early and giving them quick access to the most appropriate care. And we found that instead of increasing rates to get more profits, you simply improve the health of the population to increase profits. And it's worked extremely well. So because of the pandemic and the need to improve the management of mental health across the country, we've been sharing best practices that we've learned over these last few months. Now, we've covered topics like integrating mental and physical health, overcoming the stigma barrier, technology that monitors the emotional well-being of populations, so a true preventative maintenance program can be implemented to maintain optimal mental health, how to attract and retain top talent through supporting emotional well-being, filling the holes left by many EAPs, proactive emotional health and measurement-based care, the role of technology in mental health apps. Last week, we focused on ensuring prompt access to the right mental health provider. Today, we're going to be talking about mental health best practices for youth. The common strategy for having a patient go to a therapist's office for a visit is used by both adults and youth. However, we have found that in many cases, it's much better for you to have the therapist go to the patient's home for the therapy visit. I'm very honored to have as my guest today, Lily Landakusik, a therapist that specializes in treating youth who has been going to the patient's homes for years. Lily, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much for having me on about best practices for youth. This topic is definitely a passion of mine, and I was able to start empowerment counseling in the Salt Lake area almost 20 years ago with Amanda Escobedo and Samantha Shoup. And I just feel very grateful to be able to present on this. A lot of the colleagues that I know here, I look up to and have been mentors for me personally and professionally. And our staff, we have about 14 therapists, and they're all, I believe, the heroes, the everyday heroes, along with the other professionals that stand up for vulnerable youth, high-risk youth, the extended families, coaches, mental health, healthcare workers, all of the neighborhood, families that chip in when you see these kids, because it seems to me that they're getting more, their needs are getting much more severe now.
Thanks, Lily. Give us a little bit about your license, your degree. Where did you go to school?
Oh my gosh, I haven't talked about this in years. This is really going to date me, but I started out when I was about 17 and decided I was looking at different directions for career in academics, and I loved expressive arts, but I grew up very, very poor, and that influenced my decision to stay more of a solid track with college and a professional career versus some of the expressive arts I did. But I did have a theater group that performed on social issues, and I really missed that side of social work. But I went to a correctional facility in the East Coast and worked as a ropes course worker at 17 for kids who had been tried as adults because their crimes were so heinous. And that's where I got introduced to different models of therapy. I worked at a YWCA back in Hartford, and we did a program that won a national award for innovation that had, a lot of the vulnerable at-risk youth, gang youth, come for a midnight basketball league. And we had a speaker on life skills every night. The Navy SEALs, Jason Kidd, came. It was just awesome. And we told the boys they could never be late, not 1 minute, and they never were. And
Cool.
it showed me that kids want to be good. It's the system, the environments, it's their challenges, but all these different kids, all these different gangs came, and it won a national award. And then I saw the same thing happen at the facility for corrections, the opposite. They were using a model, some of my colleagues might recognize, guided group interaction, where every child is consequated for each child's infraction. So the youth would use their acting out to hurt another child in the group. And you could see how profoundly different the models, the outcomes of the models were just from their paradigm. So I started to get interested in holistic models, solution-focused models, and decided to go to the university, or John F. Kennedy University outside of Orinda in the Bay Area. And it was just a beautiful place to be immersed in diverse ideologies of therapy and practices, and see them firsthand. And it was a really great foundation for me to grow my business when I came back to Utah about 20 years ago, with the help of an amazing person, Amanda Escobedo. If anyone in the field knows empowerment in our business, they know Amanda. And she came to the interview with her mom and her baby in her baby carrier. And I just said, this is exactly what I want empowerment to reflect, is family and real people, and that our therapists and are human too. And I think some of the paradigms of therapy we've tried with empowerment to empower more of an Eastern philosophy, from seeing so many different models, and a lot of models that seem very problem focused or profiting off of the tragic systemic problems instead of investing in solutions. There's a lot of opinions I have about that, but I'll try to stay focused. And you'll hear dogs in the background, which I think is so perfect about this COVID environment of treating kids, is the ability to see a lot more of the humanness of the workers. And I think that's been long overdue with some of our boundaries that are really important. But I hope that's not too long of an answer right now.
No, you're fine. No, thank you very much for that introduction. So I want to mention to our attendees today that they're welcome to send in their own questions. Simply use the control box. We'll be happy to address those. Also, there is a handout that's available through the control box that you can download about Resilience Pro, which is the sponsor of this series. So Lily, the idea of going into a patient's home to do therapy is fascinating to me. Describe what that's like for you as the therapist versus the patient coming into the office.
Well, with InHome, I feel like it's a metaphor of Gilda Radner's quote about Gene Wilder, that InHome changes therapy from black and white to technicolor. When you walk into the home, you get in 1 minute a full picture, feeling, emotion, smells. You get the flow of the energy, the light, so you just see very literal. Hold on 1 second. My dog wants to be in this webinar. Sorry about that. He'll be in the next one. But that's what made me fall in love with InHome. And then the ability to do family systems very immediately versus waiting for collateral information. And I think in best practices, one of the biggest areas that's missing is collateral assessments that are thorough. A lot of times we base our assessment just on the client, and we have to remember the client's coming in for mental health issues, mental health needs, and even though it's really empowering to put the client as the expert, which is an Eastern philosophy I very much believe in, it's also important to empower them with information, because they're there because they don't have the information and the tools. So I think InHome allows you to work flexibly, almost like a metaphor of a wheel, as the home and the child being, or whoever is the identified client, but stemming from their system, not the office, where we can make them highly functional in the office with reinforcers and calm environment and all of the stressors eliminated. But we want them to be successful in their home. We want them to be successful with their friends, school, health and fitness, their finances, their career, their sense of purpose. And a lot of that is really for youth dependent on the home. And so to treat the child without treating the home and the parents is really kind of leaving them with these ideas, but no toolbox, and sending them out, with these discussions, but no hands-on practice. And we will see that from InHome when we would go, for example, try to help a youth fill out a resume and get launched into employment, because that is such a profound leap in their mental health success, is to get them linked. And we'll find that they've been out of months of highly intense residential and can't fill out an envelope. And so you'll see the focus and the paradigms of the facilities and the gaps when the child comes from, sometimes outdated. Everything's changing so much for these children and their needs, that a lot of times the mental health services are outdated or there's gaps. But InHome allows you the flexibility to be extremely resilient to their needs, their strengths, their assets, and to be very customized. Like, they may have no one that lives in the state as a family, but they may have a friend that will become a safe house, so that we don't have to use the mobile crisis unit every time. InHome allows you, when we get sometimes kids that'll come out of really severe hospitalizations, failed treatment episodes and interventions, just kind of dead end, state hospital, everything. You have to go in the home and say, what are we going to do if there are no other answers? And it is amazing, the creativity that you can link to in helping people come up with their own solutions when there aren't any. And more now, there aren't any. There used to be a predictable best practice path and least restrictive and outpatient, and then day treatment, etc. But a lot of those aren't available or accessible. So InHome, and then the use of technology to see the child's home, and then from there to be able to build on the gaps in the home and the home relationships and practice those and bring in all the family members, is just incredible with InHome. It allows also the therapist to be human, and for the client to see the therapist as, a human being, not an expert that doesn't have any issues of their own and lives in this perfect therapist, sterile world. And it allows play, it allows a permanent impact on the home, as far as some of our therapists are able to create a change in the environment and feeling of the home, so that it goes from depression, maybe a parent who's on medications, or there's underlying passive aggressive anxiety, domestic violence, all these issues that are simmering in the homes. To go in and address that for a child is some of the most immediate and profound way of standing up for their story.
Nice. That's incredible. Lily, obviously the question of safety has to come to mind. What are some of the precautions that you take and that your therapists take to keep yourselves safe? Do you meet with the patient in your office first, or do you start right off in the home? And what are some of the safety concerns you have?
Safety is such a broad topic, and you'll have to forgive me. I get so ADHD when I talk about these topics. And so I know with time, please cut me off. But safety, I feel like, is the foundation of all therapeutic environments. And now with the increasing environmental safety factors of COVID and the mental health issues related to isolation, and the mental health issues related to the civil unrest, the racial and police issue, injustice issues, with, other issues that are really exploding now.
Mm-hmm.
So safety is in the home, not just for the therapist, and we have ways of just assessing. Always they use, their observations of the home, and anything physical, emotional, mental is addressed by, I would say, pulling out the therapist and the therapy process to an assessment role. And so whenever therapy issues deal with safety all the time, you could have a very calm launching and a safety issue comes up. I think of the incident of the teacher that was working with the child online, and they had a domestic violent homicide. And it was while the child was on the online school.
Mm.
So those things, can come up when you least expect it. And those ones are often more concerning to me when they're kind of a huge safety issue or a gut feeling or an underlying anger management issue in the home that's not being treated or addressed
Right.
because the fear factor. So that we've seen some homes that are horrific that I would get a little emotional if and I'm so proud of my therapist that they are willing not only to go into some of these homes, but sometimes we'll staff about it and I'll express my concerns and they still want to go in and they won't give up on these kids. And it just is, these stories are amazing stories of heroes that I know our therapists, but other agencies probably feel the same. The listeners, these people that are willing to not take excuses, not give up on a kid are just the best people and the salt of the earth. And so they overcome, I think, those barriers. And then the next step with safety issues is building a team. If it's a housing issue, you get a team with the landlord or the housing authority. If it's a mental health issue, probation. Is it an adult issue with the adult's depression or finances, and you build teams. And
Mm-hmm.
that cut off that practice and coordination of care, and it's vital. And I think the case with this boy that got shot is another one that should make all of us pause. This autistic boy and his family, and I cannot imagine what that mom is going through. And I think our in-home workers can relate very much to these scenarios where you're calling for help. There's gaps in the system, there's not resources. And I envision a day where we're not talking about safety and guns and all of these shootings and fears and insecurities, but where we're talking about building rec centers, and every child has a pass in their family. Every child that comes into mental health has an access to online services and resources that are mailed out to their home, and online hotlines for their parents, and neighborhood watch groups, and all of the resources that are preventative and solution focused, I feel like are getting drained from intensive crises and mental health leadership gaps. So I think the other part on safety is every one of us as a mental health worker standing up for gaps in mental health and needs for the workers to be able to do therapy and not investigations, not going out on their own with more of a police or safety role, but as a team.
Right.
I think those things will change in the future. I think a lot of what we're going through, the younger therapists that are inspired are going to open up agencies that completely address these. And it's exciting to see the young therapists and how passionate they are.
That's neat. Yeah, wouldn't that be great if we could address some of those socioeconomic factors that play into ability to really just help the kids? So do you mostly go in as an individual, or do you mostly go in as a team, or are there times when you go in with like two therapists just because of some of the environmental issues?
Well, in-home is usually recommended when the issues are more severe. So we work as teams in staffing, but the therapist works individually with the case. I think that a lot of the therapists, I would imagine, would agree that we need more teams that includes a model, like more of a normalized team model, and that this individualized paradigm, especially for children who are completely voiceless in their home as far as, making the changes that are needed, maybe on the home environment, food, sleep, even a lot of these homes, they really need a holistic approach that would bring in a nutritionist, would bring in someone around affection, music, and the arts, and how to bring that into these homes that are just extremely depressed, extremely cut off and isolated. So we work alone, but we try to do a lot of linking and coordinating. That's probably one of the biggest standards we try to do. And a lot of times we find there's extreme gaps for these families. They have no family, they have no money, they're losing all of their utilities, and then they have a child with special needs, and they've been ostracized, and they've gone through every level of care and service. And a lot of times I think they get re-victimized because people will start their story and their case over again, and there hasn't been a team approach that links them back to the school counselor instead of having to start all over again, for example. I think those things and systems are going to change in the future.
Nice. So tell me, when you deal with the child in the home, are you generally meeting with the child and the parents or the family, or is it mostly just meeting you and the youth? Give me a little bit of an idea. Is it more of a family therapy session?
So this is such a good question, and forgive me if I ramble. I already know I'm doing that on this, but the beauty of InHome is that you can be so flexible. You might come to the home on a referral for a TBI, and the child has a brain injury, and they're trying to help make adjustments for the family system and the parents and empower them on behavioral and environmental needs for the home to meet the issues of the child. But then you'll find, wow, the sibling has severe untreated and undiagnosed depression. Or you'll find the marriage is collapsing, and they're embarrassed and humiliated, and they're high level professionals, or they've got roles in the church or military that they are really not open to being vulnerable. And this has got to stop. I mean, everyone who feels that they are alone, that their problems are due to their own failing incompetencies and insecurities, and the beauty of InHome and being able to customize, and not only customize an immediate treatment plan, maybe for example for the initial referral, but say, wow, the marital system or the divorced co-parenting system and pathology in parental alienation issues, for example, that there's huge gaps in our system with the family court, and people don't have the resources even as therapists. So I think with InHome, we have the flexibility to do individual, family, couples, but really the question is, what is the problem and what is the solution? And I'm a lot of times disheartened when I hear staffings that focus on, the bipolar, and they need meds, and they need another med review, and there's no prescription for exercise or touch or affection or music. These kids are sick because society's sick. And some of the kids that you end up just becoming enamored with their story are kids that refuse to assimilate. And so I think when we treat these families, it's really about following the problem and the root of the problem to their best harmony, and being able to bring them together and help them discover what their differences are and their roots and where they want to launch and be different. And a lot of times therapists will innocently try to change a child or a parent when they're really just different. Parents will say, well, it's this middle child. Well, yeah, you're really different than that child. So how can they be their best and be kind of wild and crazy and responsible, and you be more responsible and have a little more fun too, and you learn from each other? And I think the best therapy isn't necessarily based on individual family. We probably espouse more to family systems, and family systems is able to carve out into subsystems and infinite systems, societal, global, but also reduced down to the individual. And the individual child ultimately their therapy with themselves and their self-love is probably the goal that is the ultimate goal with InHome. But the systems around the child are essential. You can teach the child that, but to not address the parents who may be, innocently over lecturing and they don't realize the child's cutting off, or innocently working too much, or innocently feeling like to provide is the big role and they're missing on touch and silliness and impulsiveness and all these primary things. But I would say the most important thing of the therapy that I feel like, whether it's individual, family, is getting at the root. And if I share one personal story, I have never shared this before, but I had a therapist when I was young, and a lot of my family issues are why I am a therapist and how I chose to, if you will, play my cards. We all get cards.
Right.
And I feel like there's a myth that our cards should be fair, and that should just be thrown out. It's really how you play the cards you have. And some of the people I admire the most really got the worst cards. So to say that's a curse is not necessarily true, or to say that bad situations are bad is not necessarily true. I think the best practices for youth, with therapy is really focusing on helping them translate their circumstances to live their best life, and how to stand up for it and fight for it, no matter what the world or their family, and how to role model it, even when their family members or their parents aren't able to. I've been a failure as a parent infinite times, and I'm so grateful that my kids forgive me and allow me to keep growing. And I think the model of the best therapy practices is that focus on secure attachment. And if you can control nothing else about their home, their parents, some of these kids have the most unbelievable stories. I mean, the therapist may be their only lifeline, and to practice love, silliness, tenderness, humor, role modeling, self-care. There's all these things that are universal, that are good for families. And in the home, you can actually practice them, helping them paint their room, helping them find a place to study when, the TV's on, and helping the parents shift their tone and their style of communicating and what they're focusing on. So I can kind of end. I know I'm probably going over. Maybe I can kind of end with this story of the therapist that helped with me. She was wonderful, but she brought my mom in the therapy, and I love my mom. My mom has had 5 series of shock treatments, and my family has really severe mental health issues that go back generations. And no one talked to me about them. And I always felt like I had to adapt. And it was so freeing as I got older to realize some of the things that I do that are weird, I'm so grateful for, because they survived my childhood. But the therapist brought my mom in, and the therapist wasn't able to break an awareness for my mom about her issues and how they were impacting me. And now that I'm older, I understand my mom's issues were absolutely needed to survive her mom, who had shock treatments and was institutionalized for 60 years of her, adult 85-year-old life. And so it paints a picture where my mom is not abnormal, dysfunctional, but very normal, persevering. She's a miracle. She's a miracle, but it was really hard to be her daughter. And I wish, that as therapists, we were more able to help translate that for parents, that sometimes you really need to let go of who you are and who you want to be there for your kid at that time. Let them be right, let them fall, let them think that they know it all, but the attachment part, above all, let them know they are a freaking miracle.
I love what you said earlier about let the patient be the expert and build from that. I think that's, and we are out of time, but Lily, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing so many best practices. And again, I'm fascinated by the practice that you and your therapist conduct. You clearly been a huge contribution to our overall success by the way you are willing to really put your arms around youth and work within their environment. So Lily, thank you so very much.
Well, thank you. And I just want to also ask if I can just share that we had one of our therapists pass away, Bill Frost, and people that
Sorry to hear
can't
that.
know him, but these people are heroes, and we're grateful for all the clients that we've had that have allowed us to grow, and for everyone that knows Bill, and for any of his clients who might be listening. We're really grateful for our colleagues and how much they make a difference in our lives as professionals. So thank you for having this. What a positive experience for me.
Thank you, Lily, and thank you for sharing about Bill. So let me just conclude by saying that, again, Resilience Pro is the sponsor of this series of webinars. And as I said before, we're offering a brochure that you can download from your control box. And Resilience Pro is really taking all of these best practices that we've learned over the last 20 plus years and offering it to organizations across the country so that we can take these best practices and help implement them throughout the country to handle and to deal with the challenges of today. Let me just mention that next week's webinar in this series of best practices will be on managing serious persistent mental illness. We always hold these on Wednesday mornings at 9 o'clock Mountain Time. We thank you for participating today and wish you all a wonderful day.